Hi, I'm Scott, and welcome to Other Record Labels. Today, we're going to talk about something called the entrepreneurial seizure. What is the entrepreneurial seizure? Well, okay, once I describe it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Basically, it's that feeling you get when you get a new idea or you get a new business idea. In our case, it's the idea to start a record label. You have this overwhelming sensation that comes over your body. You're super excited. It's an idea that just pops up, whether you're driving or in the shower or lying in bed, and you race to your computer and you Google everything and research everything about starting a record label, and you find otherrecordlabels.com, and you find this super handsome Canadian guy, and you consume all his material, and you think, if I start a record label, will I look as handsome as him? It's probably not likely, but keep trying. The term was actually, I first heard of the term in this book by Michael E. Gerber called the E-Myth. This is like 15 years ago or so. I came across this term, and it really just put a name to a feeling that you get. It's a seizure, right? It's this overwhelming, like it's all you can think about. People are talking to you and you're not even hearing them. You're just like, I want to start a record label or whatever business or whatever product idea that you've come up with. And it kind of fades away. Like it's really intense for a weekend or a week. And then it starts to dissipate a little bit as you realize how difficult this is going to be and how much day-to-day work is involved. But initially, it's just this big burst of excitement. I like to think of it like rocket boosters, like a spaceship going up into space, and there's these big rocket boosters, and they burn all this fuel, and it's fire everywhere. But then eventually, like in a couple of minutes, they fall off, and then it just kind of coasts into space. So that's what the entrepreneurial seizure is. Here's why I want to talk about it today. I want to talk about the pros and cons of this when we're a business person, when we're an entrepreneur and we're trying to start a record label. What are the pros and cons? Is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And then I have 3 ways that I think you can leverage it to help you create a sustainable long-term record label. What's our goal? Our goal is to create a record label. Is our record label going to make us a profit in the first year? Is it going to allow us to quit our job right away? Probably not. Hopefully, but not likely. But understanding this entrepreneurial seizure, its power, its pitfalls, and how to leverage it will help us be in this for the long term. Will help us to prepare ourselves for however long this record label is going to take until it's profitable, until we can quit our jobs, until blah, blah, blah. This is one of the core concepts I've talked about in our courses. I talk about on our coaching calls with folks. I've talked about it in videos often. I just reference it. And it seems to resonate with a lot of you because it's something that's quoted back to me the most when I talk to a lot of you one-on-one. So I thought it would be great to dedicate an entire episode to it. By the way, let me throw a link up here where you can read this episode as an article, and there's also our podcast version, and you can go to our website and get some free resources, including our record label toolkit. Just go to otherrecordlabels.com/seizure, which is kind of goofy, otherrecordlabels.com/seizure, where today's episode and all of our free resources can be easily found. So let's talk about the pros. Are there pros to this? There are a lot of pros to this. The pros to the entrepreneurial seizure is fuel for the fire. It helps us get going. It's the energy and the excitement that will really propel us forward, even if it doesn't necessarily last. Like rocket boosters, there's a lot that you can get done while you're super excited. The entrepreneurial seizure is free. It's natural. It's organic. It's a natural drug. As long as you can identify, okay, I know what this is. This may not last forever, but it's a good thing. It also comes back. It's not necessarily a one-time thing. Yeah, it's pretty white hot when you have this idea to start a business and it lasts a week or a month, but it can actually resurface in various ways with just little ideas for projects or bands that you want to sign or album releases that you're putting together. You can have these little micro entrepreneurial seizures throughout the year. You might even get them, probably get them quarterly. Maybe every 4 or 5 years, I get like a super big one. The other pro about this is it's an internal motivator, and it's not necessarily something that customers would notice. And that's a kind of a good thing. It's something that should just motivate us, but we don't really need to preach to everyone that we're having this entrepreneurial seizure. We can just use it to help us get going. Now let's talk about the cons. The cons of the entrepreneurial seizure is that it masks the complexity of this endeavor. It makes us think that everything is going to be rosy and exciting, and it causes us to focus on the fun things. If I was opening a coffee shop, I'd be thinking about the interior decorating. I'd be thinking about the logo or the location or the menu. Those are all really fun things when starting a coffee shop. I wouldn't be thinking about the taxes. I wouldn't be thinking about getting robbed. I wouldn't be thinking about HR. And so the entrepreneurial seizure kind of hides those realities for a little while. It also misrepresents the banality of the job. We end up thinking that everything about starting a record label is going to be about picking a logo and buying the domain name and telling our friends about it, when in reality, there's more boring things ahead. The biggest con of the entrepreneurial seizure is that it's not sustainable. It doesn't last forever. Like anything with human beings, we love new things, right? When you buy a new hoodie, it smells like the store. It's really nice. Then it wears off and you just throw it in your drawer with all your other hoodies. Like a new car, it's really special. It has that new car smell, but that new car smell wears away. Like a relationship, it feels really tingly and exciting on the first date and second date and third date and the first month, the first year, but 20 years later, it's a different feeling. Guess what? Another con of the entrepreneurial seizure is that it can be kind of embarrassing, because if we don't rein it in, which we'll talk about in a second, if we don't kind of keep it internal, which we'll talk about in a second, then people see us as these serial entrepreneurs starting a new Instagram, buying a domain name, and never following through. I've talked about in our How to Start a Record Label course, I mentioned it in the book as well, How to Start a Record Label, about keeping your record label secret for the first couple of months before you launch. As you're doing your research and building it, keeping it a secret. This avoids the entrepreneurial seizure becoming external and everybody seeing it, and then if we don't follow through, it makes us look unprofessional, and it's kind of embarrassing. And my last point, my last con about the entrepreneurial seizure is it's not appropriate. It's not an appropriate way to run a business. Let's go back to the coffee shop metaphor. If you open a coffee shop, you have to have dedicated hours, probably 5 to 7 days a week, where you're open at the same time every day and you close at the same time. You have to have a reliable menu. You have to have staff there at all times so your customers can get used to it and your customers can start to rely on you in your coffee shop for their morning coffee. You allow the entrepreneurial seizure to continue when you open your coffee shop and all you're thinking about is rebranding and your interior design and what plants am I going to put in there and what type of snacks am I going to offer. And you only open up when you're feeling creative or you're feeling entrepreneurial. That's unprofessional. That's not an appropriate way to run a business. The same is true for us with record labels. We have to be kind of boring. We have to be systematic about our business. We can't just be fueled by these rocket boosters, because when they fall off, well, what happens then? Okay, so we know what the entrepreneurial seizure is. We've seen the pitfalls of the entrepreneurial seizure. We've seen some of the good things about the entrepreneurial seizure. How can we leverage it? How can we use it to our advantage? How can we temper it and control it? Let's think of it as this beast inside of us. With great power comes great responsibility. So we need to leverage it so that we can avoid some of its pitfalls and we can take advantage of some of the good parts of it. I've got 3 ways to leverage the entrepreneurial seizure. Ready? Let's go. Number 1, put a plan in place for when the seizure wears off. Put a plan in place. We know it's going to wear off, right? New car smell always dissipates. New hoodie smell always dissipates, always. Going back to this coffee shop, what would it look like to put a plan in place for when the entrepreneurial seizure of starting a coffee shop looks like? What would that plan look like? It would look like, number 1, a schedule, when we're going to be open, when we're going to be closed, and we're going to stick to it, and employees. Somebody who's going to be there, even if I, the owner, don't feel like serving coffee today. So what would putting a plan in place look like for a record label? A schedule and employees. A schedule in the sense that we're going to pick a release schedule for every year that is sustainable, something that we can manage. Is that 1 major album a year? That's okay. Is it 12? Is it 1 a month? That's daunting. You're going to burn out. You better have a lot of people helping you. Is it once a quarter? That's a little bit better. Maybe 2 a year? That's cool. Whatever. Pick a content and marketing schedule, meaning how often are you going to post on social media? How often are you going to engage with people? Are you going to just do it in bursts and spurts and say, this week I've posted 20 things, and then your Instagram goes dark for 2 months until you pick it up again? Maybe pick a schedule that you can commit to by saying, I'm just going to post on Wednesdays. I'm just going to post on Fridays. Overall, tempering your commitments and not saying, we're going to do a podcast every week. We're going to do a YouTube video every week. We're going to have 1 release each month, and we're going to have a single every 2 weeks, and we're going to do a live showcase once a quarter. Try to temper what you commit to in the first couple of years. This is the act of putting a plan in place to have a long-term sustainable record label when this entrepreneurial seizure wears off. And that could be team members too. It could be working with people or giving part of the company away or partnering with friends who have a different passion than you or have different skill sets than you. If you're a visionary leader who is very blue sky, you need to find someone for your record label and for your team who's very managerial, who likes the day-to-day boring stuff. If that's not you, you need to find someone who does enjoy that, or vice versa. Maybe you actually enjoy the day-to-day, but you need someone who's a big thinker, a big visionary leader. Go and find that person. Number two, the second way you can leverage the entrepreneurial seizure. Utilize it to get as much done as possible. Let's go back to those booster rockets, right? I mean, they just burn up for what? Like a couple of minutes, like maybe even a couple seconds. They just burn like crazy and then they fall off. We don't need them anymore. I really can't go too deep into this analogy. I don't know anything about rockets or space, but I'd imagine most of the thrust comes from those early few minutes. So take advantage of this excitement that you have. Do all the research you can right now. Watch all of the other record label videos and listen to all of our podcasts in one sitting. Go ahead. We'll become friends. But also batch some of your tasks and say, if I'm feeling entrepreneurial on Mondays, then let's record all of the content and let's get all of the work done in one day. Maybe you have one day a week. If you have a full-time job or a part-time job elsewhere, maybe every Monday is record label day, and that's your dedicated day to get all of your work done on Mondays, or maybe it's Saturdays, or maybe just whenever you're feeling it, whenever you feel creative and entrepreneurial, just try to get as much work done in that time and take advantage of it. I had this entrepreneurial seizure for my record label back in the summer of 2010 into the fall of 2011. It lasted about 15, 16 months. I mean, it was white hot. In the first couple of months, I was just, doing everything administrative and creatively to get it off the ground. But because we were a community and we were a collective, it was pretty intense and exciting for about 12 to 16 months. And then I got really burnt out. I got tired. I think everyone just kind of lost interest. It was kind of tied to the previous year, and it was hard to kind of keep that momentum going. But in those 12 to 16 months, we released at least 12 records. We did like a documentary. We did a bunch of shows. It was way, way too much. I regret, even though I had no problem like recording all of those records and meeting with bands and signing bands and all that stuff, we could have still have done that during that white hot, exciting period. However, I would have held back some of those releases until the following year when I burnt out. Well, good. Well, that's okay that I burnt out because I utilized that entrepreneurial seizure for the past 12 months to give me releases that I can then release for the next 12 to 16 months until I regain my creativity or my excitement. You know what I mean? But instead, we would release like an album 2 weeks after we just released another album, and they totally stepped on each other's toes. It was my biggest mistake in the early days. Had I just taken one of those records and waited 4 months and give it its proper day in the sun 4 or 5 months later, that would have been a way wiser thing to do. So utilize the entrepreneurial seizure to get as much done as possible, because when it wears off, you'll be glad you did. And finally, number 3, nurture and re-engage with this entrepreneurial seizure on a regular basis. Make room for it. In fact, if you feel it dissipating or if you haven't felt it for a long time, maybe book yourself into a nice hotel or go to your friend's cottage. Bring a notebook and some inspiring books and some records, and just take a weekend or a night or a full day to re-engage with this entrepreneurial spirit and this creative spirit that you have. Think of new ideas and ways that you can improve your record label. In the early days, it's important that we have the entrepreneurial seizure under control. Seizure is a good word for it because we don't have control, right? And so we need to have control of it. Maybe instead of seizure, it's spirit or it's power. We need to rein it in, control it, utilize it, own it, and then get into the habit of nurturing it and trying to re-engage it on a regular basis. It's your power as a creative person. It's your gift as an entrepreneur, is this ability to just dream up something, get all consumed in it, when regular people are just happy to go to a day job, 9 to 5, and do what they're told. That's it. So there's three ways to leverage this really cool feeling of the entrepreneurial seizure. Number one is put a plan in place for when it wears off, because it will. And that usually means systems, a schedule that you can manage, and team members. Number two, utilize it to get as much done as possible, like rocket boosters. And number three, nurture and re-engage with it on a regular basis. It doesn't really have to be a one-time thing. Go to otherrecordlabels.com/seizure to get the notes from today's episode, and you can download some of our resources that will help you in starting your record label. Also, consider joining our Record Label Academy. This is basically all of our premium resources, like our big tools and our courses and our templates and all of the books. Everything has just been thrown into one big program that you can get access to forever. So go to otherrecordlabels.com/academy. It's like getting a record label degree without the crippling debt. Check it out. That might help you a lot. We're always adding new resources to it. Thanks so much for watching.